There are a lot of skills in going medieval. Your villagers can have all kinds of perks and backstories that make them better at these, but no amount of advanced customization min-maxing will make them more capable than making sure your finest craftsman has one thing going for them: hauling. I'm gonna explain why and hopefully help some of your villages out. It sounds ridiculous. Hauling is the lowest priority job by default, an afterthought for villagers that would otherwise be idle, but they should be our idols. Okay, maybe not that far, I like wordplay. Let's take a look at just what kind of difference they can make. Both sides have Carl the Builder and Margarita the Chopper. On the right side, there's a stockpile for wood in the center of the building, and Carl is set to haul before he builds. When we hit play on the first frame after Carl turns back from grabbing the first pile of wood, you can see them both running back side by side. The left Carl gets off to an early lead by starting to build immediately, while the right Carl goes back to start hauling wood. Right Carl carries 42 or 81 wood back at a time, takes it to the stockpile, then goes back out for more until he's hauled all the wood available back to it. Left Carl, meanwhile, is repeatedly running out to carry back enough for 6 builds. That's 30 or 40 a trip. When right Carl finishes hauling, he begins building and churns it all out using the nearby stockpile. Because he brought back more at a time, right Carl only made 4 trips, while left Carl had to make 6. And in total, right Carl finishes about 20% faster. Telling your builder not to build makes them build faster. Crazy, right? He also ended up with a stockpile of wood, whereas left Carl would either need someone else to haul it back, or to go grab it himself for the next building project. That gap is even bigger when building floors. A builder still only takes enough material for 6 construction projects at once, so 6 pieces of floor. That's 12 sticks per trip. It would take Carl 6 trips to bring enough sticks back without hauling, but if we set the stockpile to allow sticks and give him the ability to haul them back, he can do it in 1 trip. That gap between them only grows further when their trips get longer. In this example, felled wood was laying nearby, but when your finest smith needs to make iron ingots, he's running across the map to the iron nuggets lying on the ground near your mine. They'll run halfway across the map, grab 30 iron nuggets, and leave the other 30 they could carry behind. When it's time to load that other furnace, that's right, they marathon back to grab another half load. They only end up spending a fraction of their time actually doing what they're good at. And the same is true for every other resource anyone in your village needs to get. Construction materials, saplings from trees you felled out in the forest, ore, fuel, food, and pretty much every other material. And don't get me wrong, a great builder or an expert smith are incredibly useful, but the difference between 15 and 20 in a skill doesn't matter as much as making sure your finest craftsman is doing what they're supposed to be doing instead of just running around. This only grows more and more critical when there's more resources being used inside a large village. So what can you do about it? Prioritize hauling. Early on, don't be afraid to have whoever's chopping trees take a break and haul their goods back to base for the builder to use. Alternatively, have only one villager who infrequently needs to do work but who spends a lot of their time hauling goods back to the village. Cooking, farming, and mining are good choices since they aren't something that villagers will spend too much time doing early on. Their work will instead make your builder, smith, and crafters way more efficient. They'll spend more time doing their actual job instead of running around, which means that they'll get better faster and give you more chances at making good equipment. But hauling is only half the battle. After all, taking goods to the wrong places is just barely better than leaving them on the ground at all. The second thing you have to avoid if you want to maximize your village's productivity is poor use of storage zones. Take this picture of my last stronghold. If I had no haulers, wood near the tree farm would need to be taken 1 task at a time to everywhere it's needed as fuel or as a building material. These long trips would add up pretty quickly. But if I kept everything in one big storage zone in the middle, everywhere else would still require a lot of running around. I know it can be really tempting, especially early on, to have one big zone. I do this. Everyone does. And you want to be weaning yourself off of just having one centralized stockpile as soon as possible. Fuel needs to be kept by everything that uses it, or your crafters, cooks, and stewards will be running back to storage every time they do anything. Anything hauled to the wrong place has to eventually be hauled off to the right one, doubling your work. Or, even worse, carried from far off to the storage spot every single time it's needed for a task. Put your rooms and your buildings down with storage in mind. Prioritize your base and plan it around hauling efficiency. Any production building that will eventually have smitheries, forges, and a bowyer's table is going to need fuel. Or if you're not sure where those will go, store it near where you plan for your kiln and furnaces to be. But even better than making sure that every little area will have what it needs, further separate those into separate small storage zones. Instead of having one zone next to your furnace for iron ingots, ore, and fuel, have a separate zone for each of these. A zone that's 2 tiles for fuel next to a zone that's 6 tiles of ore next to one that's 6 tiles for iron ingots will guarantee that not only is there never a lack of nearby resources, but that you don't store such a glut of fuel in one place that there isn't enough near your kitchen, forge, or building projects. By setting up efficient storage zones, you ensure that the single biggest productivity killer in the game, running around, has as little effect as possible. Now, a couple of closing tips. If you are doing this, make sure that you pay close attention to stockpile priority. Villagers will fill high priority stockpiles first, so they'll haul goods between stocks as soon as there's a chance to if one is set to a higher priority than the other. As bad as it is for a builder to run out and get 12 sticks every time he needs to make a new floor, you also don't want your hauler carrying 12 sticks to a new stockpile every time there's a chance. Conversely, actually doing this can be important for some goods like books. Bookshelves need to be set to a high priority or haulers will never fill them up. Shelves are likewise considered their own stockpile zones with their own priority. And as a final tip, put a small stockpile for construction material near any new projects and have someone haul there for a bit to give your builder some early help. A great way to do that is to put one very high priority space in wherever you want it, then delete a space with that resource from your old stockpile. Now if you enjoyed this video, a like goes a long way towards telling me how helpful it was. If you find yourself watching a lot of my videos, consider dropping a sub.